Hey everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show. My name is Tom Marks. Here with me today, two very special guests. We have Keith Lee, CEO of Counterplay Games. How you doing, Keith?
It's great. It's great to be here. Thank you.
And Emil Anticevic. How are you?
I'm doing great.
CTO of Counterplay. I'm sorry, I didn't even say your title. I'm not giving you the respect you deserve here.
Yeah, we're a small team.
Yeah.
It's fine. The title's
Well,
not that important.
You guys, developers of Duelyst, we're very excited to have you on the show. We're going to do a little bit of a Duelyst exclusive reveal later in the show, but we've got a great one today. First, I'd like to welcome all of the watchers, the viewers from the Duelyst community joining us today, but I'd also like to real quickly apologize to anybody who's used to watching the show or listening to the show, that is, on iTunes or the RSS feed. We've had some technical difficulties the last few weeks, but it should all be sorted out. Thank you for hanging with us, and just know that we value your listens and you being here and appreciating what we do, so thanks for sticking around. This week, though, we're going to be talking about Ken Levine, writer of the BioShock series, is apparently working on an interactive Twilight Zone movie thing, which is kind of strange and very cool. We're going to be talking about kind of what that means. We'll also be talking about Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which I got a chance to play a couple weeks ago, but wasn't actually allowed to talk about playing until very recently, and enjoyed quite a bit, so we're going to do something with that. And then also, of course, we'll show off Duelyst and be talking about that later. But first, we start the show the way we always do, which is talking about what we've been playing this week. Keith and Emil, you guys actually are viewers of the show as well, which is, I think, one of the first times that that's happened. We've had developers who are also fans of the show on. So I guess I'll let one of you guys lead. Keith, would you like to start? What have you been playing when you're not playing Duelyst?
So I like to actually play games. I view games that I really want to play like wines. And so I like for them to kind of get a little bit riper and a little bit more refined. And so I tend to actually have a schedule of games that I've already blocked out that have been released 6 months ago. So one of the games that I've been delving really deeply into is Divinity Original Sin. And on the Enhanced Edition, I just started opening up actually Fire Emblem Fates Birthright.
Oh, cool.
And it's just such a great game. But then again, I have to open up every single FAQ that's out there because it's just really hard to have a first clean run. And so I generally play maybe about 10 to 15% into a game, like Divinity and everything else, get a sense of the game itself, and then I'll start to re-roll and replay it again. So those are the two great games that I've been really enjoying.
I feel like that's also a common thing, at least for me with RPGs, is pretty much everyone I know who played Divinity Original Sin got about to the 6 to 8 hour point in the game and then went, wow, I built my character entirely wrong, and restarted. And I think that's something kind of inherent to RPGs when they ask you to make a big decision of what are you going to be for the entire 80 hours of this game.
Yeah, and there's those abilities, kind of like Lone Wolf, that are so defining, where it's you're better off on your own or with companions or something like that. That's such a big branch in the game that you kind of put that decision off forever. You save up your skill points forever. You start hoarding them and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm totally there with you.
Yeah, for example, Wasteland 2, I was playing that, and when you're going into the character creation screen, it is a wall of text. Literally a wall. And Emil was playing, and he's like, I can't even get started. It's just too
so
intense.
much.
I don't blame you.
I reading.
Did trudge through it. I figured it out, and then I've been playing that game a lot too. But yeah, I still had to re-roll because I was like, should I have that skill to get the toaster? And there's a toaster skill to explore the toasters. It's should I do it? Should I not? So that's always the tough part with RPGs.
Yeah, I have 8 perks saved up in Fallout 4 that I just constantly keep a rolling 8 just in case. If in case I change my mind or need to respec before something. That's my safety buffer.
That's my Divinity build too.
Yeah.
I have so many extra points in that I haven't invested in. I have spells that I want to get, the 3rd tier spells, and I'm I have to wait because I just cannot. I'm just too scared to spend those points.
That's also the similar thing in RPGs where you have some great item or some great potion and you're like, I'll save this for the moment I need it, and then you just end the game with it in your inventory.
I have so many
consumables. The worst.
So many arrows of Divinity that I haven't touched.
The arrows are the worst. You just never know when to use them.
Yeah.
Oh man. What about you, Emil? What have you been jumping into lately?
Lately, I've been doing a lot of stuff for the past couple of months. Past week is tougher. So,
You can go broad, please.
All right, well, I've played a bunch of Darkest Dungeon. I've played actually a bunch of Helldivers. So I actually didn't even know that game existed until it came to PC, which I don't know how I missed that one. So when it came out for PC, a bunch of friends and I dove in and really been enjoying that. It's like a really nice little co-op, compact, amazing co-op experience. I've been playing a lot of Fallout 4, but taking a break from it. I've learned something from Fallout 4, and I think I was talking to somebody about this. I was like, well, you gotta wait for the mods and this is why I'm waiting. XCOM 2, like I'm just like letting it marinate, like a great, like it's gonna be like a great wine. It's gonna take a little bit of time before it's ready to play. Because Fallout 4, I played it like all the way through, and it had like 60,000 bottle caps. I had every item. I had like 8 perks saved up. I was like, I didn't play this right, and I played it on the highest difficulty. Mm-hmm. So, I've been playing a bunch of World of Warships, but I've taken a break from that for about a month and a half, 2 months so far.
I've actually never dived into any of the World of Warships, Warplanes games. I know they did the April Fool's War Trains one as well.
So good. Okay, so World of Warships is it's FPS for like people like me who no longer have the Twitch. So it's like super slow motion. You're lining up, like your visor, and you're like you take a shot and you watch the shells travel for 18 seconds. But then when they hit, it's so satisfying. All these ribbons start popping up all over the screen. Yeah, it's a fun game. It's like and like I'm a history buff, and definitely World War II history and naval history. So I enjoy the ships and enjoy the whole lore.
Yeah. One thing that they innovated a lot on World of Warships that was really cool is when you die in the game, they actually pop you off into your main menu, into your HUD, and you can join another game. But what ends up happening is you still accrue XP, and you still, based on the victories that happen,
you just can't use the same
ship
into. Yes. You can't use the same ship in two battles.
So you never have any downtime. You never have to wait for the game to end.
No
you
respawn.
Just exit out and go back into another.
Yeah, like once you're done, you're done. So
That's interesting.
It's permadeath, hardcore.
So roguelike competitive shooter, basically.
Yeah, not really, but sure.
Too far. All right. Well, speaking of permadeath and hardcore, I guess this isn't permadeath. The game I've been playing, honestly, besides Duelyst, because I have been playing a lot of that lately, but is Dark Souls 3. And I mentioned that on stream last week, too, that I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls 3, but something kind of strange happened to me with Dark Souls 3, because I was playing as a Dex character with dual swords and like trying to use miracles and lightning and stuff like that, and I got to the point where I was like, man, I really just wanted to know what a spellcaster was like. And, anyone I've talked to, like James, our reviewer, thinks I'm crazy for trying to go as a spellcaster, but I was like, why not? I'll try just a full-on sorcerer, only magic in Dark Souls. And I really liked it, but the thing I was finding was, like, you don't have an aiming reticle in the same way that you do when you use an arrow or a bow or bows or crossbows, in Dark Souls. So you have to, like, really weirdly line up your shots. Like, I have to learn the spot on my helmet that is the aim, like if I line up an enemy to be above this spot on my helmet, like I can hit them from this distance, and it's really weird. And I found the best way to do that was with a mouse and keyboard. So I've actually been playing Dark Souls 3 as a spellcaster with a mouse and keyboard instead of a controller, and it's like, I feel like James described it as looking at a new color, right? Like it's just this like completely like weird, strange way to play the game where I only have a single Estus flask and like 5 or 6 Ashen Estus flasks, and it's crazy to me that that's like just a play style that not many people explore, and probably for good reason, because it's like really weird and like it's just a strange way to play the game.
Did you draw a little dot on the screen for yourself to like have a reference?
No, I still go by the helmet. I actually switched helmets at one point, and I was off. My aim was completely bad.
The casters were really popular in the original Dark Souls, right?
I think they were.
That's what I played. I remember finishing the game. I haven't played 2 or 3 yet, so I don't know all the different classes or anything, but
I know they were less popular in Dark Souls 2, and that kind of maybe is where this preconception comes from of them being like a weird thing to choose. But like it's very strange to do it because it sort of feels like the developers didn't expect anyone to play with a mouse and keyboard in Magic either, because like you have such precision aim that you can, and your spells are so strong that you can just like one-shot people before they even see you. So you can really accurately aim up these shots at like guys that are far away from you, and before they even get aggroed, you just like tap them and they're dead. And on top of that, in 10 hours of playing, I've basically found no new weapons or armor specifically for casters. So like it's this really weird, like I feel like I'm in like Dark Souls purgatory, where like I found this part of the game that like is just odd to play, but also really, really fun to play.
Do they have that alignment system like they had in the original Dark Souls?
Alignment, like you mean
They
like
have
the auto aim, slate auto aim? Or?
No, alignment meaning that if you die, that it changes the whole world, and there's like different things that kind of happen based on NPCs and things like that.
No, they mostly removed that. I think that was also in in Demon Souls, right, where the more you died, the darker the world became, and the harder it became, and the more people killed bosses, the lighter the world became. And then also they did this funny thing where on Halloween they made the world as dark as it possibly could be, and then on Christmas they made it as light as it possibly could be. So like no one could play the game on Halloween because it was just so intensely hard, but then on Christmas it was like crazy easy for everybody. I liked that system, but no, they don't have that in Dark Souls 3. It'd be interesting to see how something like that would work, like how people would react to it nowadays.
Right.
Well, we can jump right along. I thank you guys for sharing what games you've been playing. It sounds like you actually have had more time to play like more things than me even. And I tend to like focus in on a few things, but there we go. Let's talk about Twilight Zone, and that's a weird topic to talk about on the PC Gamer Show. I know, everyone bear with me. So earlier this week or late last week, Ken Levine revealed that he's working on a Twilight Zone interactive movie. And what that means is not quite clear yet. But basically what he said, and I'll pull up the quote right here, is he said, interactivity is a spectrum, it's not binary. And then he said, as I think of it as the viewer's angle in the chair. When you watch something, you're sitting back in the chair. When you're gaming, you're leaning forward in the chair. This is an interesting place in between. Your brain is forward in the chair. So we don't know if that means it's a game or a film primarily. We don't really know if that means that it's something like, it's probably not something like Quantum Break, which is another game that's been tried to do this recently, of like, you're in a game and then you're watching a show. It's probably something in between.
Well, this seems like Ken's like sort of side thing, and my take on it is that it's gonna feel a little bit like a game like Her Story, where it has that choose your own adventure. It's sort of like that choose your own adventure thing that did it on YouTube recently. That's like part of the Fallout series.
One? Oh, that was so good.
And I'm sure that they can start to develop it where it's going to get simplified. People can have like different like smaller and smaller episodes. I think Twilight Zone is an interesting medium because it has a lot of that macabre sort of dark twists, which kind of fits Ken's like view around BioShock and System Shock and things like that. But to me, I don't even really think of Twilight Zone anymore, even though there's a lot of new shows like Black Mirror on Netflix, where, of course, that is basically inspired by Twilight Zone, or maybe like Tales of the Crypt and things like that.
Yeah.
And I love like that show. And Black Mirror, I think they're actually starting a third of the series on Netflix. So that's going to be really cool. So yeah, I think something like that's like a Her Story, very interactive. It could be really interesting for someone like him.
So my question is, is that what you would want to see out of that kind of like Her Story experience, or like in an ideal world, Ken Levine gets to do anything he wants with the Twilight Zone license? Like, what would you want him to create? Because to me, I think it's really a dangerous kind of like thin line to walk between when you call it something an interactive movie, because if you go too interactive, it's just kind of like a very linear game. And if you don't go interactive enough, it's like if you just like spatter interactivity in there, it kind of becomes this thing of like, why am I not just watching this?
Yeah. There was like in the late 90s, they actually tried doing a bunch of sort of FMV videos in the theater cinema where they had these little controls and they had these like test pilots where you can actually vote into changing how the movie worked. But see, this is the thing that sucked about it is it's very binary, and as a result, you still feel like you lack a lot of agency. And also as a result, the quality of the final ending isn't as good because you start to question whether all these sort of decisions just funnel back to the end. And so I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, but then you look at like, Telltale style model where you do have it's more than binary. There's like, 4 choices, not that much more than binary, or some of these like, choices like that, and it still funnels into a somewhat linear, not linear, but somewhat coherent storyline. I mean, it can, if it's done right, I think it could be. Like, I'm always excited about new modalities of storytelling or interactive or whatever it is, so I'll definitely check it out, and I'll be excited to see it.
Plus, I do know that Ken is really into Twine and sort of these much more interactive sort of systems. So, and he's always talked a lot about building very modular, smaller writing components for his future projects. And so maybe he's experimenting with a lot of that stuff for his core game, too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you brought up, Emil, too, because like I feel like that line is getting more and more blurred nowadays of like what even is this like a game, especially with VR, because like the Apollo 11 VR experience like is interactive and to a degree, but like is that even a game, and like does that title even really matter, like whether you call something a game or not?
Yeah, and narrative-based games have gone through so many kind of iterations on what the dominant modality was, all the way from kind of point-and-click adventure games through third-person kind of narrative games on that you'd play on the consoles and stuff like that, to RPGs. And now there's this kind of whole emergent narrative is kind of the dominant way to play. So, survival games and Minecraft and like these places where the narrative is emergent out of, player interaction and stuff like that. So it's good that, it's probably pretty good that we're trying to do new things in the space there, but it's going to be tough to see. And I know that, a lot of people are going to try to do this on VR. I was also surprised it wasn't a VR experience, or at least it wasn't specified as a VR. It doesn't mean it's not a VR experience, but I was surprised that it's not kind of an Oculus native experience or something of that sort. Because I know that obviously those folks, HTC and Facebook, have a strong interest in creating unique experiences for that platform that can't be experienced anywhere else. And that would be awesome. I mean, like, you're flying to PAX. How great would it be to spend the 8 hours in an interactive narrative experience instead of sitting there staring at the back of a seat, the whole time. So.
That's the next level of in-flight movies, is Oculus Rifts just in the heads of the chairs.
Oh, it'd be so good.
One day, I suppose. One day when they can have computers with 970 graphics cards also in those chairs.
But come on, airlines, they spare no expense. They just love that stuff.
And we were just talking about first class earlier, so there you go. That's the first class experience, is you're just in an Oculus Rift the entire time. But what about the I hate to use this word, but the IP of Twilight Zone, right? Like you said, Keith, Twilight Zone is pretty old and has inspired a lot of new things, and it's it's revered. It's this great old show, but like, is this a what do you call this? Is this a reboot? Is this a revitalization? Is this meant to lead into Netflix announcing that they're doing a Twilight Zone reboot series? Like. How what do you think about using this old IP instead of just calling it something new? Don't mean to put you on the spot there. I think it's interesting to me because there is so much history with it, but it just also makes it all the riskier, I think.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know of Serling and how Twilight Zone was created and how it was written. I think most people just think of Alfred Hitchcock and a lot of the black and white Twilight Zones that were happening in the past. I haven't even watched a lot of the ones from before. So it might be okay because none of us are familiar with any of the stories from back then, and I'm sure they could remake it and modernize it for today.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of a compelling kind of target to set, that even though there might not be a great brand around it or something like that, it's not as recognizable, at least thematically it makes sense. Like, you never question what should the story be if you're making a Twilight Zone story. You never question what should the kind of the morality of that kind of story be and stuff like that. So it gives you like a nice narrative center point to build around, and kind of coherent theme and universe and stuff like that. So there's some benefit to it. But yeah, the brand is kind of questionable.
I think Ken is also a huge fan of that series, so maybe that's just part of his thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it definitely... the BioShock series pretty clearly, I think, took inspiration from that sort of mind-bendy stuff, especially Infinite to a certain degree. I'm really interested to see what his spin on it is. I was one of, I guess, I don't know. What did you guys think of Infinite's story if you played through Bioshock Infinite? Because I played that game and I freaking loved it. I thought I was totally into the Infinite story, like the weird universe-bending, time-shifting stuff. And then I got out of it, and a couple years ago, or a couple years later, I started hearing all the discussions around Infinite as like a retrospective, and everyone was like, oh, Infinite was ridiculous, like the story made no sense, and like most of the people I know didn't like it, which I was shocked by because I was really, really into it.
So did people not like it because it wasn't logical in the sense that it wasn't, there were things that had loopholes, or is it more just the overall theme?
I'm not sure, because I mean there are a lot of people calling out loopholes, but people call out loopholes in anything.
Anything with that projection of time and all that is always going to have
yeah
those paradoxes.
If you ever saw the movie Looper, it was my favorite scene in that movie. It's like a pretty okay time travel action movie, but there's literally a scene in that where Bruce Willis is like standing there and somebody's asking him all these questions about time travel, and he's just like, we're not going to talk about it. Like, he just says that. He's like, just don't ask questions, move on. And it's like him just saying to the audience, like, don't worry about it. Don't look for loopholes. Just move on. I don't know. I think a lot of people probably also reacted to the fact that it wasn't underwater and it wasn't as horror-y, you know? It was like, it was a much kind of more action-y, brighter game.
It was warm colors and bright, and
Yeah.
sunshine was hitting every building. It was like a very nice, like the palette was definitely different than the original.
So maybe it was just like a reaction to that difference rather than anything else. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually like the ending. I like the fact that you at the end you're
Spoilers,
seeing,
everyone.
You're seeing the myriad lighthouses and this notion of this multiverse that you're entering and going into, but the visualization of that was cool.
No, I agree. I think that the fact that like the last 5 or 10 minutes of that game was also just like a movie, like I was sitting there like, whoa, like totally blown away by it. But I think some people were turned off by that as well. But regardless, it's a really interesting direction to be coming from going into a Twilight Zone whatever, right? Like, because he's very clearly loves that sort of thing, and he loves those kind of big twist reveals, you know, if the Bioshock series is any indication. So we'll see what he does with it. I'm interested to see if he does new stories or old stories and that sort of thing. I'm interested to see the level of interactivity. I think it's just a very, like, it's a lot of questions that I have.
Yeah, and the other question is also like level of agency. Like how much are you funneled into 1 or 2 or 3 possible major choices?
Yeah.
Versus how much of it will be, you know, how much actual agency there is. And then the question becomes, if there's not that much agency, whether people will feel connected to the story. It's a very challenging problem. So I'm glad somebody's trying it.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible to make games that are narratively compelling and have like a myriad of endings possible? Because, you know, we were talking about like earlier about like Life is Strange and Her Story and the Telltale games, and one of the criticisms of more recent Telltale games is that like all the decisions you make kind of don't matter because, like you said, you branch but then you always come back in the end. Like, is it just too much work to make compelling stories that could end 8 different very different ways?
And you probably need a new grammar of how to develop these things, you know, among other things. And you need a new kind of way and kind of tools like Twine and some of these things that are pushing things forward, or like the component-based storytelling or modular or something like that. I don't think, you know, more than anything, you could probably make a great game, but you need to find the language to make it with that would kind of be coherent and make sense as developers, you know.
And I think a lot of gamers tend to also be pretty min-maxers, and so there's always this feeling, did I get the optimal ending? Did I get the optimal outcome? Like, you look at Undertale. Is it better that you did it a certain way or not? But maybe that's okay. It's really more the process and just enjoying the game itself. I mean, one example is Witcher 2, where you do have this very, very divergent, and then the first 1/3 of the game, it diverges dramatically based on your choices. Of course, it does funnel back to the end, but the sheer amount of work for them to have built these completely different sets, different environments, different like dialogue, it just blows my mind, because if someone doesn't play it, and this is an example when I was working on Diablo 3, that's another example. Like, most people might do one run through, But you don't realize that actually all the dungeons, you had only experienced maybe 5% of the permutations of all the different dungeons that are on the ground. And the level of complexity about creating these sort of tentpole pieces that people can recognize, but also building smaller pieces where you don't recognize things is a really hard thing to kind of balance. So what you see is a very tip of the iceberg all the time, and even just for The Witcher, it just blows my mind. It must have cost them and spent like just so much money just to even do those two divergent paths. Mm-hmm. So,
and I know this isn't PC game, so I'm sorry to everybody watching at home and listening, but you were mentioning Fire Emblem as well, and the newest Fire Emblem does a similar thing of it kind of felt like it was supposed to be one game where you make this one choice and your path, you play basically two separate games after you've made that choice, and they split it into two, so it's kind of a different situation then. But we can move right along. We can start talking about Mirror's Edge. I really enjoyed that discussion, though. I hope you guys did, too. It's kind of hard to get the vibe of chat when all they're, like, yelling in the chat is nerf Tuskboar and stuff like that, so...
As a preview, we are nerfing Tuskboar.
Oh, there you go.
So we'll be dealing with the Tuskboar.
You have been
and the Songweaver.
Chat has been sated for now.
And the Sunsteel Defender.
Oh man, this is just going and going.
Everything's changing now.
The Vorpal Reverb is going to be dealt with too. Mesmerize. We're going to actually fix that too.
Well, to anybody who doesn't...
I should just have a card called General Lee, because basically Grandmaster Lee, because and my keyword should just be opening gambit, dying wish, massive reveals. So it should just not be played.
Yeah, we should have a card called Eric Lang that every time it deals damage, it changes the units completely.
Is that what your designers is about?
Yeah.
Well, those of you who don't play Duelyst, probably that sounded like French to you, but more will be revealed later in the stream. But now let's talk about Mirror's Edge. I got a chance to go to EA down in Redwood Shores a couple weeks ago and play Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which is the sequel to Mirror's Edge. And I got to play it pretty much, it's what they're going to be doing in a closed beta coming up, and I got to play it just like as much as I wanted. We're actually going to pull up some video footage just so you guys can see while I'm talking about it. And I got to say, I really enjoyed it. Did either of you guys play the first Mirror's Edge either?
Yeah.
It's, for those of you who don't know, it's a first-person, free-running parkour game, and the main change from the first game to the second game is that it's now open world. So instead of being this linear path with a linear story that you run down and you're going through these very, like, immaculately designed set pieces, now you're going through this huge, intricate world that just has all these different paths. You can see the world map here is just... It kind of looks like a Ubisoft world map to a certain degree, where it's just this big place with all these icons and lots of little side missions to do and stuff like that. But I was really enjoying it. I actually... It feels like the original Mirror's Edge, which was like a huge thing to me. I was really nervous that they were going to say, like, oh man, we got to change it up so that, you don't roll or something like that. And I'm really glad that they really made it feel like the first game.
I just love their color palettes, the way they created the textures, that really clean, minimalist look, that elegant industrial design look. That's just something, I mean, like, there's so many other games that have that really dirty, rusty sort of texture look, and I just love how they did that. And they were mentioning how the night scenes took a lot of time because they have a whole system now for changing night and day, and it's supposed to be really beautiful.
Yeah, the sunsets in particular are really, really nice. And they did do a great job of making the world just beautiful, and also making the world design feel like Mirror's Edge. It sounds like Mirror's Edge. It looks like it. It's not just that it plays like it. And the thing I didn't actually like as much was the open world. Not because I didn't like... I liked exploring. I liked kind of finding my own path to missions and stuff like that. But the problem was in the demo area I played, there was one base, and there's going to be more of those bases, right, as you progress through the game. But there was one main base, and then there were 2 exits out of that base to get to either side of the city. So every time you went out to a mission and then had to come back to your base, you were running one of those paths. And by the 7th time I was running one of those paths, I was just done. Like, I was just so tired of running the same path over and over and over again, compared to the first game where every time you run something, it's the last time you do it. And so they can afford to make these worlds feel really unique and weird. I guess I have to see, we'll have to see how that changes as it goes. This is that's showing on the screen right now is actually one of my favorite new features in the game too, is they have this social kind of component to it, which is such an easy way to turn people off of a game like this, is to say, oh, there's an online social component with it. But it's actually pretty cool. You can while you're just walking around the city, you can lay down checkpoints and create your own time trial paths. And then your people in your friends list will randomly get these time trials just plopped into their city, and you can go find them and then try to beat their time on it.
They're only visible with your friends.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, they were only visible from your friends.
Okay, so it's not like Dark Souls where you can see ghosts or other people planning things.
No, your friends show up on your map, so you can't see them. You're not in a persistent world with them, but you can see an icon of where they are on the map also. I'm not sure why, but that's okay. There's also this upgrade system, which I do want to briefly talk about, because people were complaining a lot online about that fact, certain abilities or certain free-running maneuvers are locked behind upgrades that you have to level up for, and people were kind of getting mad about this, but I unlocked everything that I was it's surprising that you can't do this right off the bat. I unlocked within a couple hours of gameplay. So I think it's really more just a way to slowly introduce the free running than anything else.
Because the free running part I heard is pretty complex. If you want to really optimize on your trials and things like that, there's a lot of different buttons you could do, soft rolling and getting that higher kick off the jump and stuff, right? It's not it's not Assassin's Creed, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely not. And that was actually something that, I said that the free running felt like Mirror's Edge 1. It actually felt better than Mirror's Edge 1. Because the thing is, they did exactly that. They added a lot more subtleties to differentiate being good at it and great at it. You can save seconds if you just know the timings of those jumps and stuff just a little bit better. But the thing I want to ask you guys about, especially from a development standpoint, is, and obviously you guys aren't making a free running open world game, so I understand that this is mostly going to be your personal opinions on this, but we've seen basically no large single-player games in recent times that aren't open world. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm just missing something, and I'm sure I am, and I'm sure, chat, if you know, what am I getting wrong here? Please tell me. But it seems like that's just the way that the industry has trended in single-player games, is big open world, huge budget, where everything is really intricately designed and the map is covered in things to do. Which I'm not entirely sure if I'm crazy about. It's not that I dislike it, it's just that I kind of missed that linearity of Mirror's Edge, of always running forward instead of running back.
I actually get really, really overwhelmed with games like Arkham or even Grand Theft Auto, just because there's just so many things to do, and I feel overwhelmed in the sense that I don't feel like I'm completing everything I should. But that's just maybe me. In contrast, Fallout 3 Las Vegas has that kind of perfect blend. It is still that open world vibe, but it's still very directed, but I can pretend that I'm just completely exploring. I don't know anything, and I just go wherever I want to go, and I'm just sort of picking up quests and doing things, and I'm just living my own narrative. While with Grand Theft Auto, it's still somewhat directed, and I know basically this is just an interface for just lots of different mission objectives, but packaged up in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, it's really at the end of the day, it's not drastically different other than the presentation than Fallout 3, Fallout 4, even Divinity, where it's a little bit more linear, and you're but the whole concept of going somewhere and then going back, or going somewhere and going back, having this kind of map with objectives on it is fairly similar. I don't know why it feels so much different. But I agree with you, Tom, that it does to a large degree. But yeah, it's the games that everybody wants these days. It's the games that really people really enjoy. And the bar keeps getting set higher and higher and higher. So you see more of it and more of it and more bigger worlds, more objectives, more intricately designed buildings. And it's got to be. It's like there's entire zones that are 100 artists have spent a month working on that most players won't even see. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
And if you only
reward.
have, let's say, $60 and you want to invest in a game, then yeah, those are like the perfect products where you can play it, and then you can mod it, and then keep playing it. So that's a really good investment. But
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it from just like the straight bang for your buck sort of thinking. Somebody mentioned in the chat, Wolfenstein was not strictly open world. I guess to a certain extent too. Like the Tomb Raider games are less open world. Obviously, in the newest one, you can like explore an area, but it is kind of pushing, like shuttling you down a path a little bit more. In general, the exception to this rule lately is shooters, campaign shooters, or shooters with campaigns. But now those shooters are just not even making campaigns anymore. Like games like Overwatch and Rainbow Six and the list goes on, just don't have single player campaigns, and that's their.
Or it's like feels
Borderlands.
tacked on.
Yeah, or it feels tacked on.
It's like
yeah.
Borderlands, and then now it's more like Battleborn.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, I'm just like, I really missed the open world or the linearity of Mirror's Edge. Like it was a lot of fun, and I gotta say also, Sam Roberts, our editor-in-chief over in the UK, he felt differently. He didn't tire of the open world nearly as quickly as I did. So like I might be a little bit out on a limb here when I say this, but like, because exploring the world was cool, but there's part of me that misses that kind of like Metro experience. Metro 2033, I played the Redux version of that, and like that just like really intense kind of like grim, dark, go down a spooky tunnel until you get to the next spooky tunnel is like something that is not very common anymore in big single player games, and I understand it too, because I guess if you make, like you said, you have 100 artists spending, a year on one area. You want to get as much value out of that area as you can. You want people to spend as much time on that area as you can, so that you don't have to make, 800 more areas like that.
Unless you're Naughty Dog and you can make Uncharted, where you can go to the top hills of Tibet. Most people would not even spend maybe 5 seconds to look at the mountain scene. Most people might just run down and start to complete their mission.
Just take the
I
Jeep
can
right
guarantee it probably took 30 artists to build that top scene with the fortress that's like up in the air, and just some of their city scenes. Probably a month. Of
Wow.
30 artists to take 5 seconds for you to look at.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and just roll right through in like
Yeah.
a car chase scene, and just like window by window by window. But there is something, the big question, and for me is, can you have like as good of a Fallout is such a solitary experience, right? Even though it is it's harder to have a shared experience in an open world game, where there isn't even though there's like quests that kind of create this linear narrative, it's not really the same. I was talking to a friend of ours. We obviously, Keith and I play a lot of multiplayer games that are very multiplayer focused. Playing Fallout, and he was saying I was really into the game, and I was like building my base, and there's like the base building component, kind of the settlement development, and I was putting all these lights, and then like halfway through I was like, no one's ever gonna see this.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Like, who am I doing this for? And that's why you can't compete. Even the open world narrative experience, you can't really compete with the kind of user-generated narrative experiences and the shared experiences that might be like a slightly more compact.
Yeah, we
game.
play a lot of DayZ. We play a lot of Rust, tons of Rust. And after experiencing Rust, being able to build, you have the highest highs and the lowest lows playing Rust. So once you start playing Fallout and you're building your base, and it's like more of a single player experience, it's just so flat compared to that intensity of playing those other games.
And it's harder to create a shared experience, right? We remember every moment we spent in Rust because we're hiding, because there's like a band of people outside with torches. And we're hiding in our little hut, shaking, in our respective next to our respective computers. Whereas, in these open world games, it's like everyone has their own adventure, if you will. So it's kind of harder to share and talk about. Well, I didn't do that build. Why I don't even do that quest. Why I didn't even do these things. So.
Yeah, and I really like that point of like not being able to share stuff like that, especially in open world games, because it's one of the reasons I think that you don't see many like super customizable features in big open world games. And Fallout 4 is the huge exception to that rule, like massive exception to that rule. But yeah, you don't see many of that custom stuff. And even I remember back to when I was playing Minecraft really consistently, I would always build my stuff. Like when I wanted to build a big project or like do something in creative mode, I'd do it on a multiplayer server that I just like built for myself, just so on the off chance that if like I wanted to play with somebody, I could show them, you know, like because if I built it in the single player world, then like what was the point basically? Yeah. That's a really cool point. So here's the question: do you guys think that open world is like is it in its peak? Is it about to fall? Is it just the new standard? Like, where do you think it's going to go next with like single player games like that? Do you think we're going to see people like me who miss linearity and kind of want to return to that, or is it just kind of like what we got now? Because I personally can't imagine how The Witcher 4 is going to top The Witcher 3's world, right? Like, The Witcher 3 was this just ginormous landscape, and how does The Witcher 4 ever compete with that at that point?
Or that sci-fi cyber...
Oh yeah, Cyberpunk.
Right? Cyberpunk?
Yeah. I'm going to get the year wrong in that. I think it's Cyberpunk 2077? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, there we go.
That's a very broad question, though. I mean, is it a hypothesis? Do you think that it's reached its peak? That single player open world has reached its peak?
I don't think so. No, I think that this is the prime of it, and that it's not going to fall yet. I think that it might have reached its peak, but that doesn't mean it's like going down. I think it's about to like this is what it's just going to be for like at least a year or two of games. I think that we're not going to see people really call for change for a while. And that's people being consumers, not because game developers, as far as I can tell, AAA guys who can, afford to build games this way, like have no reason not to, because those are the games that sell the best, and those are the games that are, like you said, like people just buy them for $60 and play them forever. Mm-hmm. Fallout 3, Skyrim is still being played, like these games that are endlessly moddable in open world are just always going to have a space.
Keith?
I don't have a strong opinion on this.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, let's give the people what they want then, I think. The chat is still rioting. There's robots